landscape of memory. In Constant Flux, the landscape of memory and memorials of World War II in Europe. My name is Kristina Smolynina-Vaite. I'm a Deputy Director at the Secretariat of the EU-Russian Civil Society Forum in Berlin, and also lead the program Confronting Memories. And I'm working not alone in the Confronting Memories program, together with my colleague Marcus Chavez, who is also today with us. He can also wave his hand or put on emoji that you would be recognized. Shortly about the Confronting Memories program. It is a historical memory and education program that deals with multi-perspectivity and creates spaces for exchange and dialogue on different legacies of the past. And over the last few years, we have created a number of materials to be used for history education and in multiple languages to use and download on our website. So before we move on to the discussion about the memorial landscape in Europe and hear from our speakers, so that's why we are here, I will briefly present our newest publication, Pedagogical Guide on the use of World War II memorials in history education. The guide was developed by international group in 2022, and I see also some of the authors together with us in this audience. So these were 4 educators from Germany, Moldova, Poland, and Russia. Their work was tested by a focus group of educators from all these countries, but plus we also had we were also happy that it was possible to invite, and people or educators from Ukraine also came to this Poland summer school in Poland to test these materials, this pedagogical guide. And the whole process was facilitated by Euroclear ambassador from Denmark, and then is also here with us. The guide, good that you raise your hand and you show yourself. And the guide will be published soon on our website and also in print. So now, Marcus, please, we can go to my very short presentation. It's only 3 slides, and I will give them the word to our speakers. So let's go to the first slide of why we decided to work on monuments this year. We thought that in contrast to written sources or even images, memorial sites provide a physical portal to history and make it more tangible for students. So they can induce greater emotions and deeper engagement with the topic. And this is a great way to incorporate multi-perspectivity in terms of different attitudes towards a monument over time. So, and different present day attitudes. So in this sense, they also connect present day life. And so in the next slide, please, I will explain why it was also so important for us. So first of all, let me stress that the guide was made by educators for educators. And we wanted it to be useful as much as possible. And what better way it is to create such a guide than by people who also then will be using it, so educators. So it will be used for education of young people, and the guide connects pedagogy to present day life that I already mentioned it before. So why it seems to us important? So on one hand, we stress the value and attitudes-based competence following Council of Europe competence butterfly. So this is also the image that you see on the slide, which deals with things like the importance of human rights, openness to cultural otherness, respect, civic-mindedness, and so on. So this is an important aspect of history teaching that is very new for many educators. So we are also very happy to integrate Council of Europe butterfly competences. On the other hand, we aim to go beyond teaching national narratives. Thus, we popularize multi-perspectivity, and we define 2 types of multi-perspectivity. So one is different use of interpretation as they exist in the present day, and different perspectives on historical events over time. So both of these are evident when we are dealing with memorial sites. And going further, that this process, I also would like to mention that was of creating this guide was as important as the guide itself. It was democratic process and featured the exchange between the educators from different countries, including also between Russian and Ukrainian educators during our summer school, which was especially an extremely valuable experience and as well very moving experience, and also nowadays, which happens very, very seldom. In general, in our program, in our website, if you had a chance to take a look at our website, we have 5 languages that we are offering for our audience. So because we want to celebrate, this variety of languages and to be as inclusive as possible. And our pedagogical guide that I am introducing now, it is in 4 languages. It is in German, English, Polish, and Russian. And the last slide, please, and just shortly about the structure of the pedagogical guide, and then we will move to the discussion. So our aim was to make the guide as practical as possible, which is why there are 8 full learning activities or lesson plans, which can be used as they are or adapted to local context. By which I mean the memorial site that is the focus of the lesson activities can be changed, but the methodologies and activities can stay the same. So, but we also felt it important to flesh it out with some further research and recommendations for teachers. So there is one chapter exclusively, about pedagogical recommendations, which were also picked up from all those lesson materials. So to have one good overview, and for example, there's also a definition of multi-perspectivity is described in more detail. And also, for example, why visits to memorial sites is important for history education, how to prepare students for visits, also dealing with their emotional part when we are dealing with some certain memorial sites like camps, for example. And there's also the essay on the memorial landscape in Europe, which tracks in the history of the memory of World War II in Western and Eastern Europe, and the special type of memory culture that exists in Russia. And it was written by one of the speakers today, Christoph Meißner. And finally, we offer some specific instructions on visiting memorial sites and a list of other memorial sites that can be incorporated into lessons about World War II. So again, the guide will be published soon and will be online and a bit later in print. So also let us know if you want to receive a copy of it. Thank you for attention now. And I would like now over you, Professor Yang, who will be moderating the discussion today on the landscape of memory and memorials of World War II in Europe.
Thank you very much, Christina. My name is Daqing Yang. I'm a history professor at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So very honored to be part of this panel discussion. Thank you again for coming to this event. We have 3 great panelists from different countries with different professional backgrounds. We will start with a discussion by these panelists, and then we will open the floor to the audience. So those who just joined our panel discussion, you can write down your questions in chat. So our subject today is in constant flux, landscape of memory and memorials of World War II in Europe. I think it goes without saying that World War II has been by far the largest violent event in human history, and the memories of this event is still very much relevant today. So we're mainly looking at memorial landscape that are physical, such as museum, monuments, but through that, we're also trying to understand memory culture in terms of the practice, the institutions, in the larger context. So we will first discuss the question, what is the memorial landscape of World War II in your country in terms of architecture, physical appearance, and how it fits into the larger memory culture. And our second question is, how has it evolved, developed over time? So let me turn to the first speaker from Poland. We have Estera Flieger. She combines the role of a historian and a journalist, which I think is very important, and we need more of that. She had worked in one of the most important newspapers, Gazeta Wyborcza in Poland, and now she works at the KARTA Center Foundation, which is an important NGO, a partner of this organization, EU-Russia Forum. And she's very interested in historical politics, memory studies, especially relation between history and film, discourse on World War II. So Estera, welcome, and the Zoom floor is yours. You have about 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. So it's very nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And yeah, for a few years, I was a journalist. Now I'm working in KARTA Center Foundation. So I will tell you something about my experience in my past life as a journalist. So for 3 years as a journalist, but also as a historian, that's why I was obliged to do it. I was writing about Museum of the Second World War in Gdańsk. As you see on the slide, I quote there its first director, who said that it was the most important discussion over history in Poland in last few years. Let me add that debate over the museum has started in 2008, 9 years before the museum was open. So presenting by Professor Paweł Machcewicz the idea of the exhibition in the article also published in Gazeta Wyborcza, a main liberal newspaper, still one of the most important, it was enough to start a debate. And as you see, Professor has explained why. The subject of the debate was how civil should be the narration of the exposition in such museum, in such institution. To be more specific and go into the details, in other words, the question of the debate was, what's the place of civil experience in the memory landscape when we talk about World War II? Of course, the debate was also, or maybe first of all, political, since everything is politics, especially when we discuss history of the World War II. But I have not enough time to go into details. Probably you will ask me about it during the discussion, so there will be a chance to come back to it. So the idea of the historians who created this museum was to focus on a civil experience of the war, with the conclusion that war is a universal experience, that it was something the same for people who experienced Second World War, and it's the same for people who live in Syria now or now in Ukraine. Yeah, and conclusion of the exhibition was that war is a very bad experience, and we learn simply nothing from history. And there were politicians, historians, journalists on the right side of the public debate who claimed that such a museum should focus on military aspects of war, and for whom presenting, for example, stories of women who were made to serve as prostitutes in concentration camps during World War II was even shocking, because presenting a history from perspective of civils was something very new in Poland at this time when the museum was building and when it was open. Yeah, it was still something very, very, very new to focus on civils. And the politicians and journalists from the right side of the debate, they expected something very different. They wanted a museum which will be at the same time something like a monument of Polish army during the World War II. So when right-wing party, Law and Justice, Prawo i Sprawiedliwość in Polish, won the election, they changed the director of the museum, and the director decided to make some changes in the exhibition. And on the next slide, can I ask for it? Yes, thank you. I will tell you something about it because it's a very good example how discussion about memory landscape can look like. And you see here on my left side the gas mask for a child. I decided to show you this example from exhibition because it presents the sense of the narrative. It's quite touching. I think one of the most touching artifacts in this museum, because it shows you what war means. Yeah, the gas mask for a very small child, for a newborn actually. This was the intention of historians who created the museum. And on the right side of the slide, you see some other stuff. And to start from the gun, it's Nagant. It's a gun, Russian gun, Bolshevik gun, let's say. And it's from a part of museum which was telling story of Soviet propaganda, Bolshevik propaganda, before war has started. And the intention of historians who created the museum was to tell a story of impact of Soviet propaganda on people, presenting by a board game. They decided to put the board game, which was a propaganda for children, to create a new Soviet society, Soviet people. And the new director who came to the museum after a right-wing party won the election, he decided to remove a board game and he put there a gun. I mean, it's a very good example how they see, how in different way they see telling stories. That gun is very literal, something very literal, you know, and the board game was something more, it leaves some space for interpretation. It shows a different level of history. So yeah, that's why I decided to show you this example of changes in the exhibition. And in the right corner, you see some souvenirs from World War II museums, which are now sold in museums. So it also presents how now new director see the memory landscape, because as you can see, these are shared cufflinks, and they are planes and bombs. So it's some kind of, I don't know, pop history or something even more. So from a museum which was presenting war as a very bad universal experience of civil people, now it's something totally different. And I think this shared cufflinks are very good symbol how there are two different ways of seeing history. And on the next slide, I try to answer the question, how has the World War II memorial landscape developed over time? So as you can see, the discussion about World War II has started in Poland very late, because since 1989, when transformation begins, for many years, history was not a subject of a debate, because there were some different things to do in a country to start to build it from a zero, actually. So history was not important for liberal side of a debate, which was focused on some economic reforms, then not on culture, let's say. So the milestone was 2001, when started the debate over Polish-Jewish relations during World War II. And this discussion was not only about Polish-Jewish relation, but it was also about how to talk about World War II, which part of World War II are the most important for collective memory, and yeah, it was very hot debate, but it was still very, very important and a very, very good debate, because now 20 years later, the society is so divided. You know, it's also from United States. It's actually the same, that such a discussion is not possible anymore. It's too political. It's not all about history anymore. It's only about politics. So this 20 years ago, it was very important, very and it was on a very good level. And after this, another important moment was 2004, when the Warsaw Uprising Museum was opened. It's a very important because it was first narrative museum in Poland. As the good example is Museum of the Holocaust in Washington. So it was the Warsaw Uprising Museum was first narrative museum in Poland, and after opening this one, another museum in Poland started to be also narrative. It opens some, I don't know, changing of discourse, presenting of history, different way of talking about war. And as you can see, another two events I put there. It's 2011. It's important because it shows how important are these military aspects when we talk about history in Poland. Yes, soldiers, guns, etc., and so on and so forth. And that's why talking about civil experience is still not so common. And 2015, right-wing party win the election, and yeah, it's a new chapter of history discussion. And to conclude this part of presentation, I want to say that what we observe since February 24 is that the way we discuss about war in general should change, because war for us now has a face of women and children, which we see every day in Poland. Women and children who escaped from Ukraine to Poland. And I believe that it will have a very big impact, or I hope it will have an impact on the way we discuss World War II. And yeah, I used to say that we can read like dozens of books about war, but when we met a refugee, it's changed the way we think about war. And meeting refugee, we know that we know nothing about war, even after reading like dozens of books. So I really believe that there are some projects on recording refugees from Ukraine, to make some kind of Spielberg archive of this war. It makes historians, it makes other people, and that they record refugees. So I think this project, I know one, and it's very big, it's international, but it has started here in Poland. I think it will open a new discussion about talking on war. Yes, for it was probably it was very chaotic, but yeah, I'm quite nervous. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Estera. What you just said reminded me of my own experience. I was living in Poland a year ago, so this encounter with refugees really had a great impact on me, even though I have been teaching the history of World War II for several years. But this is truly a new experience that will have impact on me. So thank you for that great overview of the changes in memory landscape in Poland. So we move now west to Germany, and our next speaker is Christoph Meißner, who is currently affiliated with Heinrich Heine University in Düsseldorf. And he has a background directly involved in museums and exhibitions. He had worked in the Museum Berlin Karlshorst, where he curated numerous exhibitions in the field of German-Soviet relations. And he also is working on an exhibition project on the subject of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. He also has published on the withdrawal of Soviet forces in Germany after the end of the Cold War. So the floor is yours, Christoph.
Thank you, Daqing, for the kind introduction, and thank you to the organizers for making this talk possible. And maybe we will start with the presentation, then it would be quite easier for me to start my talk. So when analyzing the memorial landscape in Germany, the division of the country in the GDR and Federal Republic at the end of the Second World War must be taken in account. In both countries, memory sites emerged only after some delay, and this had several reasons. However, the memorials of the Allied occupation forces appeared in the landscape much more earlier. Large memorial sites were built in both sides, like in East and West. I show here for the East the Soviet memorial in Berlin-Treptow, which was built from 47 to 49, so immediately after the war. And on the other hand, in the western side, there was the Allied cemetery in Camp Lindford, which was built already in 46. So this there was even no idea of other memorial sites, and this had a reason. And because memorial sites to this or memorials to the sites of German crimes, they were built only later. And for one reason, it was that concentration camps continued to be used in the immediate post-war time as DP camps. This was in the West largely done, and in the East they continued as special camps of the Soviet NKVD. So they were used again as kind of concentration camps. And the other reason, which is quite more important, is that even the society was not ready after the war, because they first needed to come to terms with their own history. For these reasons, it was initially largely survivors of the Nazi regime who initiated memorials under the authority of the occupying powers. In Bergen-Belsen, the memorial on the from my side, right-hand side up, the memorial was established in 1952, but this was only under pressure from the British occupying power. In the GDR, there we have, for example, the Buchenwald Memorial up from me in the left up. They're established in the 1960s three main they called it national memorial sites. They were in Buchenwald, Sachsenhausen, and Ravensbrück. They were just committed to state doctrine and focused on anti-fascist resistance and communist victims. There was no place for others. In the 1960s, in both sides, but especially in the West, with this system competition in the Cold War and the growing discussion about the Nazi regime, this led to the establishment of memorials in a small scale, as we see in Bergen-Belsen, but this was only under the kind of guidance of the occupation powers. Only the generation change and the so-called history. So I make now a big step and come to the 80s, because in the 70s this was largely standing still. The memorials existed, but not that much, and only the generational change in the 80s, 70s, late 70s, 80s, and the so-called history workshop movement, which researched on local histories, led to an act of rebellion against the silence in the 1980s. In this process, many places first had to be discovered because they were unknown, or there was built something else above it. And I like to only mention now one really, for myself, really prominent example. It's the site of the Neuengamme concentration camp near Hamburg. This was still used up to 2006 as a prison of the Hamburg police. So the next slide, please. The big turning point, however, came with the unification of Germany. Now the federal and the state governments committed themselves in a so-called memorial concept, and this was about financing the memorials. And this was dedicated to the Nazi crimes, but also to the memorials to victims of the second dictatorship, which means to the Soviet socialist dictatorship in the GDR. For the first time, small initiatives and projects had a chance to be supported and institutionalized, thanks to the funds that were made available throughout this program. And this led to a flourishing memorial landscape, which developed from that time on, and which to now comprises over 400 memorials and documentation sites all over Germany. These documentation sites are distributed, and this is really important, decentral throughout the country, and vary in size and design. So there's no central memorial site, there are decentralized memorial sites all over the country. Pretty much every group of victims is mentioned. Also, the places of perpetrators are marked and documented. So for this reason, I just put here the documentation center of Nazi Party Ready Grounds in Nuremberg, and also like to show you with the example of the memorials to homosexual persecuted under Nazism in Berlin, that also some kind of small groups of victims are commemorated. In addition to the memorials, which I mentioned, there's also small plaques and a kind of civic engagement. And for the small plaques, I put you here a design of in remembrance to forced labor victims in Radebeul. So the city of Radebeul, it's a small city nearby Dresden. Came to terms with its past and was able to put there a plaque which remembered the victims of the forced labor in the times of National Socialism. And in a way, this is also what many big and small companies related to forced labor made. They came to terms with their past in a way that they created these plaques, or even they started to install small exhibitions. One special movement which I like to mention here, which is not particular German, but it have its origins in Germany, is the Stolpersteine. They have spread from Germany to all over Europe. And the initiative for this came about in the 1990s throughout an artist. And the golden stone, maybe you know it, maybe you don't know it. This golden stone is set into the pavement of in front of the last known address of a Nazi victim. And over time, more than 75,000 commemorative signs has been created worldwide. So it's spread around the world. And let me conclude now with this sentence, which is kind of banal, but maybe it will help us in the discussion. In Germany today, there's a diverse landscape of memorials and commemoration flags. But whether this also applies to the memory culture and memory is something what we can explore maybe in the upcoming discussion. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for this fascinating presentation. As you correctly call it, it's a very diverse memorial landscape. I remind my own time living in Berlin, in Munich, and visiting other German towns. So now we turn to our third and last panelist, Dr. Irina Ramanava. Like me, she's an academic. She's a professor of history at the European Humanities Universities in Vilnius, and currently she's a visiting professor at University in Gießen in Germany. Her specialty is the relationship between authority and society under Stalinism and the years after, as well as the politics of memory. So Irina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And I think that I should start from some point about politics of memory in general in Belarus. I don't know if you know something or not, and I will start from this point. The memorial policy of Belarus is focused on the period of the Second World War, which is still reduced to the Great Patriotic War. It means a manipulation in several respects. At once, by September the 1st, 1939, about half of the territory of modern Belarus was part of Poland. For its inhabitants, the war began long before the June 1941. The main state holiday, Independence Day of the Republic of Belarus, since 1996 has been dedicated not to the day of the proclamation of independence, but to the day of the liberation of Minsk from German occupation on July the 3rd, 1944. Fixing the official policy of memory on the construct of the Great Patriotic War does not mean the historicization of the war, but the reproduction of the Soviet historical narrative, the continuation of its ideologization. It must be emphasized that the discourse of victims and the fate of the people now implies not to the Soviet people in general, but the Belarusian. In every Belarusian city, there are streets and monuments commemorating the heroism of the Soviet people, and also a local history museum or museums of national glory operate. The last were created in the 60s, 70s to perpetuate the heroism of the people from this territory at first. The main symbols of the country you can see on the picture are the Memorial Complex Brest Fortress Hero, Memorial Complex Khatyn, the Mount of Glory, the Museum of Great Patriotic War, Stalin's Line. The new Museum of the Great Patriotic War in Minsk is more ideological project than historical one. The Stalin Line is an object that has nothing to do with history. The Belarusian State Museum of the History of the Great Patriotic War and the Memorial Complex Brest Fortress Hero compete for the status of the most visited museum in the country. It should also be noted that the names of the street and squares of cities are also to a large extent connected with the history of the war. Since the 60s, Minsk has begun gradually turning into a large war memorial. This trend continued in the 2000s. The largest percentage in the toponymy of Minsk is still occupied by names associated with the Great Patriotic War, more than 15%, which is 2 times more than those associated with Belarusian history and culture, only 8%. The list of names include Minsk undergrounders, Belarusian partisans, military heroes of other Soviet republics, Soviet military leaders, not necessarily associated with Belarus, representatives of the old Union heroic pantheon, etc. In general, this is about 1/3 of all historical figures whom streets were dedicated to. Since the 90s, Holocaust monuments have appeared or become visible, as some of them were created in the previous period in the traditional Soviet memorial landscape. Systematic work to perpetuate the memory of the victims began only in 1991 after the creation of the Union of Belarusian Jewish Public Association and Communities. According to the historian Botvinnik, in 2000 there were more than 500 Holocaust monuments in Belarus. By 2022, 142 monuments and plaques have been erected at the expense of the Simon Mark Lazarus Foundation. The most famous is memorial to the victims of the Nazi genocide, the pit. The obelisk was erected in 1946 and was one of the first monuments to the victims of the Holocaust in the USSR. In 2000, a sculptural group going to death was installed. Today, the Trostenets Memorial Complex is also very famous, which is installed on the site of one of the largest death camps in Europe. However, the topic of the Holocaust never come into the focus of the Belarusian so-called official scientific community. This topic is dealt with only by the historical workshop named after Leonid Levin and another very interesting place and Museum of Jewish Resistance in Novogrodok. And next slide, please. The events of 2020 actualized the confrontation in the sphere of historical memory as well to narratives collided in society, an official one, the pro-Soviet one oriented to the cult of the Great Patriotic War, and an opposition one formed outside state structures and institutions. On this slide, you can see the most important maybe data or laws connected with the transformation of state memory politics into a subject of special concern for the political regime through its securitization and the institutionalization of extraordinary measures. And I think I will speak a little bit more about all of these measures maybe later, but you can see now we have new reality, or our country should make a step back again in the Soviet past, but on the new level, because now we should work under such circumstances as the law on the genocide of the Belarusian people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Irina. You touched upon some very important themes that I would like to follow up. I should also mention that I forgot to introduce Irina as a native of Belarus, which gave us a really interesting look in this discussion. So I think the three panelists touched upon some of the themes that are very important in memory studies. For example, who are the actors? Is it only the state that create monuments, museums? We heard from Christoph that in Germany, an artist could start a whole movement with these dumpling stones, which now spread beyond Germany, almost a new kind of memory practice. Also, the question of the theme of heroism versus victimhood. I think Estera talked about the emphasis or the new emphasis on the World War II in the new World War II Museum about Polish resistance, almost the equivalent of the Museum of Polish Army, versus the suffering of civilians and others. Do they have a place in the commemoration? Of course, this also ties into the theme, of the Holocaust memory that Irina talked about in Belarus. And of course, this again also opens new lines of contention, as Estera mentioned, associated with young girl's book, The Neighbors. So I think the memory politics is a common theme in many of these discussions we just heard. I would like to move on to a discussion. And before we open the floor to everyone, we will use the next 10 minutes or so to have a discussion among our panelists. And as a moderator, I would like to abuse my privilege to ask the first question. And it's also a theme that has been touched upon, that is there a transnational factor in the production of memory? What I have in mind is, I think about almost 15 years ago, the German scholar Eleda Ausmann talked about a European community of memory. In this sense, World War II seemed to be a very appropriate candidate because at least Europe has been engulfed in this calamitous event. And I think Irina's presentation mentioned that in the Soviet times, not unexpectedly, the museum content has been very much affected by the kind of the Soviet narrative, which probably still exists to some extent. And so the first question to all of you is, you mainly talk about the memory culture, memorial landscape in your country. Do you foresee, or do you see already, a transnational influence shaping the museum or narratives in the memory culture in your country? Who would like to go first? Yes, Christoph, please.
Probably then I will start, because I think that it's quite, it's for Germany quite an easy task to answer this. There is an influence of transnational institutions and transnational, transnational influence. I would say this is mainly done with the Holocaust. There was in 2000, there was the Stockholm Holocaust Conference, the big one. Some years later, the United Nations also spoke about the 27th of January as a day of remembrance for the Holocaust victims. So barely Germany cannot avoid the guilt. So we we need to face the guilt, and the question is more if how we face this guilt and how we should not, or how we cannot forget the second kind of dictatorship, means the communist dictatorship in East Germany. But I would not say that Germany is one of the leading transnational actors. These are other actors. And that's why I would say, like, for the influence on the memorial landscape or memory culture or memory politics, it is the standing that never again Holocaust, never again. This is the kind of big slogan which is forming above all. And yeah, and this is, I think, but this is a common sense in the international sphere.
Thank you. I think it's very appropriate. We started with Germany, as Christoph said, mentioned. It's not only because Germany or Nazi Germany was the perpetrator, the instigator of World War II in Europe. It also because West Germany has been part of the European community, which of course now has expanded eastward and to include Poland, others. So maybe Poland, Estera would be sharing. Yes.
So the answer is yes, and the good example are Polish-Ukrainian relations. I mean, before full-scale invasion of Russia on Ukraine has started last year, the dialogue between Poland and Ukraine about common history was very difficult because Polish-Ukrainian relations were very complicated and it's very sensitive area. But war has started at different level of this dialogue. And it's a good sign, actually. And it shows that some processes are very natural, that politics can, I don't know, create many remembrance law, etc. But some things just happen naturally. There's one part of my answer. And the second thing is that I think the memory landscape is something created from many elements. It includes many elements. I discuss official memory, institutional memory, but it's also academic. It's also something we can call memory of families or biographical memory. So I think on this academic level, it's very, how to say it, international academic debate creates also new trends on discussions in Poland, and it can also work in another way around. The museum I talked about, it's unique because it's one of the first of the museums about World War II which focus on civilians, because many museums in United States, they'll still focus on this military aspect. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Estera. Since you had being a journalist, can I ask a follow-up question about the production of memory? You mentioned academics. I'm an academic myself, but how do academics get their sort of role in the memory production broadened to engage with the wider public? You mentioned this dialogue between Ukraine and Poland is something I've been also extremely interested in. That's how I discovered the KARTA Center Foundation, who has been playing a very important role for a very long time. So the question in terms of the public media and the memory formation, if you can shed some your personal experience, especially in this cross-national dimension.
That's a very fascinating question. Thank you for this. And the World War II Museum in Gdańsk, it was created by academic historians. So this is a very interesting case. Professor Paweł Machcewicz was academic historian, is still a very academic historian. Last year he visited Yale University, so he's still giving lectures. And but he was also very active as a columnist. He was writing for many newspapers, and the museum was his idea to find, I don't know, a language to translate from academic historical language to talk to the society. And I would say that it's not so common in Poland that academics are also columnists. In many cases, they are closed in their own environment, and they don't interact too much with public opinion. And as I present on the second slide, 2001 year, and the debate around neighbors, it was also a case where academic historians, they were engaged in a public debate. The situation made them to engage, and they took a very important part in this debate.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think the World War II Museum in Gdańsk try to engage different parts of the world. So as a historian of Japan, I was pleased to see Japan also being featured, the Asia theater of the war. Okay, so we now turn to Irina. Obviously, Belarus is situated in a different position compared to Poland or Germany, but you had mentioned the increase of Holocaust-related memorials. So maybe can you say something about this transnational influence in the memorial landscape in Belarus? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that here we can speak only about really Holocaust memorials, not about other places or changes some kind in politics in general. But yeah, for example, Trosteniec, this place was very important for many European countries because a lot of Jews were killed here from European cities. And it was some kind of not only dialogue, but participation from European countries, some discussions. And for example, the Minsk History Workshop worked with different European countries and first of all with Germany, and they prepared exhibition, and this exhibition traveled through different European cities and in Belarus, but now we have a different situation after 2020 because this exhibition was forbidden in Belarus. In many cities, it was impossible to show, etc. And now, as we can see and compare some tendencies in Russia and Belarus, we can see the same processes. But this is not about transnational influences, of course.
Okay, I think we are ready to open our discussion to the audience here. Again, thank you for your patience. I've seen already a few questions, and those who have questions to post, please use the chat box. And if you post in Russian, we will have it translated into English. I think there was a question for Esther. I think it's more of a matter of clarification. What do you mean by a narrative museum in Poland? If you may clarify.
Narrative museum, I understand as a museum which we can compare to the movie. It's a museum which engaged someone who visits this museum. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a story. It's telling the story. It has a beginning and the ending of the story. Yeah, it's something like a movie with a scenario of exhibition. Mm-hmm. There are not only artifacts. They are not put like, I don't know, in a chaos, but every picture on the exhibition, every artifact tells a story which has its own order.
I see. And then you mentioned the Warsaw Uprising Museum was the first
one. Yeah, the second was Polin, which is Polish Jews, history of a Polish Jews museum.
Actually, on that one, can you say a bit more, since Irina also mentioned the kind of new emphasis on Holocaust in the Belarusian memory culture? If you can maybe just introduce to the audience here about the Polin Museum, which is also very new, very impressive.
Yeah, it's a very great architecture also. And this is a very interesting museum because it's a museum about 1,000 years of Polish Jews. So this exhibition is not focusing only on Holocaust, only on war, but it presents impact of Jews on Polish culture. It presents our common heritage. Mm-hmm. So I think it was very important to present this history in this way to show that it was not only war and Holocaust, which is very, very, very important, but it presented that the story has begun earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. For me, my first visit was to the monument to Ghetto Uprising, which is right next to the Poland. Of course, that's the famous site when West German Chancellor made that famous gesture of Niefeld. So there was also a follow-up question for you as well, if you don't mind. The question is there any change in the memorial landscape in official Polish position, that is official speakers' speeches in the past years? I suppose that's when you talk about the right-wing government, PIS government came to power. Beyond this, you talked about the Gdansk World War II Museum.
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's also very interesting. And yes, but there's always a but. So first of all, as I said, after a transformation in 1989, history was not so important. Liberals focus on economics, but for many people in Polish society, history was still important, and they felt like a hunger of history, and it was a fuel to right-wing politicians when they win the election in 2015. History was a very important part of their program. It's actually only one party in Poland which in official party program, you can find some information about how they see history, how they see historical institutions. So yeah, it was very, very important fuel. But now I see that this fuel is over, that the trend of the telling stories about cruised soldiers, it's like it's over. So they were more radical on the beginning, going to the power, and now it's I see that some processes are stopped. But I think there was very important lesson in 2018 when Polish government decided to push a very radical law, which memory law, let's say, which touched very sensitive area, Polish-Jewish relations. It was about it was a new law about how to talk, let's say, about some cases of Poles who took part in events like Jedwabne, for example, yes. And it was a very big international scandal, very big international debate, and Poland paid very high price, diplomatic price for this very radical and very bad law. So it was very difficult to government to officially say that they were wrong and to take step back, but finally they did it. So I think that they have it in mind. Yeah, but on the other hand, last year the government started debate about money which Poland should get from Germany. But the temperature of this debate is also, I think, different that it could be a few years ago. So something has changed, I believe, yeah.
Thank you very much for that wonderful follow-up. So if others have more questions, please type them in the chat box. Yeah, this memory law is not unique to Poland. I think Irina also mentioned something about legislation that try to punish those who deny the genocide. For example, during World War II. Of course, Germany also has its own. So although they don't deal directly with memorial landscape, I think they definitely shape the memory culture, the practice. So maybe a follow-up question is...
Can I add something? Sorry, if I can add something, because there was a question, in this question, there was a question about official speeches of politics. Yes. So I can also give one example of change. In 2019, on December or January 2020, I don't remember exactly, there was a Holocaust forum in Israel. I remember it very well because Russia was invited there. I mean, Putin by himself was invited by Israel government to Yad Vashem on this forum, and also it was a big world debate about this event. And Poland was not invited because Poland and Israel had very diplomatic big crisis at this time. And it was also a time when Putin made his traditional historical lecture, and he lied, of course, about World War II. And Polish government had to decide how to react on Putin words. And I remember a very good speech of Prime Minister of Poland, and yeah, it was unique because he, in his speech, he tried to talk to Russians that it's our common business to stop Putin lies, because he also lies about their experience, how they suffered during the communism regime for many years, how their families suffered. So yeah, it was also a good example that something sometimes changes.
Thank you for that follow-up. And there is a question for Christoph. Let me just read. Is there a contradiction between people in Germany who prefer a look at history from the side of post-Soviet culture on the one hand, and then on the other from the side of European culture? I'm not exactly sure what the post-Soviet culture refers to.
Actually, I try to interpretate it now, this question.
Yes, okay.
So
yes.
First of all, thank you for the question. And I try to interpret it that way, that the post-Soviet, how was it written? The post-Soviet side or perspective or some culture is the East German, the former East German, and the European culture is the former West German. I would like to interpret it now like that and speak about that, because it tells us something about a split, or the question maybe indicates that there's a split in the society about this, and this is true. It would be even strange if it wouldn't be. East Germany had a 45 years experience of Soviet narratives, of Soviet influence, and this to push it away overnight, and we are now 30 years after it. So there's almost 15 years to go that we have an equal time. So to push this away would be not possible, and it is shown. Okay, so I see. Yes, from German past. This I will speak about the immigrants. I will speak later. Okay. It is even now in times of the full-scale war against Ukraine from Russia. It shows it pas pro toto. You can now experience it. For example, on 9th of May, 8th of May, 9th of May. The East German population is more convinced to this date and is like celebrating this as a liberation date, as a date of freedom, and so on. In West Germany, it is now becoming a bit, and in East Germany they follow very much the former Soviet narrative. In West Germany, it is now a bit pushed back, and people are more asking about what is this narrative, this Soviet narrative, how can we critical think about this? And it is also, for sure, it is also a matter of the generation. So my generation is just grown up in the last years of the GDR, like of the communist time, but I'm not very much influenced by this. But when I looked, for example, to my grandparents, they are influenced by it, and they are now just referring to this. So there's pretty much a split in the society. It is not that obvious, but it is getting obvious at this kind of memorial dates, like 8th of May, for example. And now to come to the immigrants from the former USSR, and this is exactly the same. So when you go on the streets in Berlin, for example, on 9th of May, there is no German on the street because they just don't. For them, it's a non-date. I mean, it's the date of the 8th of May is maybe the date of liberation, like our former president Richard von Weizsäcker in 1985 was the first one who said, like, this is a day of liberation. So before it was a day of defeat. We would even the German society was even not understanding what is it for a day. And maybe now it is more clear that it is a day of liberation. But when you just focus, and I will now put this group as one, but don't misunderstand me. This is a very heterogeneous group, those who came from the former USSR to Germany. I would say like that a lot of people just still following the Soviet narrative, and they are the ones who are just on 9th of May on the streets. There are big, not big, there are just car corsos in the city with the Russian flag, with the St. George's ribbon, with the kind of Pabieda everywhere, and so this is the Soviet songs are played in the memorial sites. So this is the way how they celebrate it. And I would say, like in a diverse society, we should just take it as it is. It is a chance to even have a look on this, but on another way, it is not the kind of German perspective. But I would not go that far that it is a conflict. It is just these are two narratives which are going parallel. So maybe that's briefly on this.
Yeah, I think this goes back to your earlier point about the diversity in the memory landscape in Germany. So in that, I'm just curious whether this kind of May the 9th celebration has a change in the past year or not?
Not at all, not that much, because still there are some kind of veterans from the national army of the GDR, or just people who have a strong who think that they have a strong connection to Russia. Indeed, they had a strong connection maybe to the USSR, but they just it's like Russia is the same as USSR in their minds. So they oversee that there are different other countries which were suppressed by Russia in the USSR. And the Russian community still celebrates it, yes. But I'm not sure if it was that much or that many people from the Russian community, or if some of them, because they are in opposite to the war and in opposite to the regime in Russia, which very much indoctrinates history and uses history as a weapon. That they maybe there was a small change, but obviously in the streets you could see as in the past you could see this people and this music and listen to this.
Yeah. No, this is really interesting. I mean, to borrow this term from Estera Osman again, there could have been a different community of memory that centered on the Soviet version of World War II. And then even after the demise of the Soviet Union, you have some people, including, as you say, East German veterans, who were once member of that community, and they have not given up their membership, so to speak, even though they live in Germany, unified Germany. This also raises an interesting question about the sort of everyday practice of Germany, the memory, that is, a anniversary. So the question come from our own Marcus. Even though our discussion began about these monuments, about museums, people don't go to museums every day. But on the street of Minsk, as Irina mentioned, you encounter street names associated with World War II. And this is not unique in Belarus. Or in Germany, you increasingly have stumbling stones on the streets. I see less in Poland. So the question is this a good way of commemoration, or does it make it too everyday or mundane? That's my interpretation. And this question is open to all three of you. Street names, stumbling stones. I cannot think of other.
I think Professor Yang's frozen, but Estera, you want to say something?
Yeah, I can start. So about street names, I'm from Łódź. Łódź is a city in center of Poland, and there's a group of women activists. It's a non-government organization, and this group of women, they do some actions to change street names from names which means nothing to memory famous women in history or women at all. Some of them are forgotten. So I think it's a very good idea. And I really press my thumbs for them, because they did some actions which had an impact on Łódź, and they thanks to them, some women who were very important for Polish culture, for Polish history, they have now their own streets. So it's very good initiative. But on the other hand, there are some actions, like, for example, the institution of national remembrance in Poland is producing teddy bears for children, because during the World War II in Polish army there was a bear, Wojtek. He was helping, for example, in Monte Cassino battle. And I'm not a big fan of such initiative. I mean, war is not a teddy bear. Especially now in Polish kindergartens and in Polish schools, there are children also from Ukraine. So it must be very difficult to them to make lessons about war, and giving them teddy bears, which memory Second World War II, I see no sense in such action. But to comment on stepping stone, I like this idea very much, and I hope one day we will have some in Poland.
There was a question for Irina. I think it's something you talked about. Maybe you can clarify more. That is, after the end of the Soviet Union, to what extent the memory policy in Belarus diverge from that of the Russian, or are they mostly similar when it comes to World War II?
Thank you so much. The situation in Belarus began changed maybe earlier than in Russia, since 1996, I think so. For example, it was impossible to think in Belarus about such kind of museum as Museum of Gulag. It was in Russia, but was impossible in Belarus at all. And I think so-called soft Belarusization, which began since 2014 in Belarus, demand new policy from Russia, how to influence on our country and our policy of memory. And for example, at the institutional level, Alexander Dukov and the Historical Memory Foundation, which is headed by him, are cooperating with the Institute of History. And as you know, maybe this foundation is directly connected with the implementation of the Russian official historical policy. It takes part in the memory wars on the side of the state. And I think this is very important and interesting example will be this cooperation during this cooperation, a number of publications were prepared, including collection of documents series without a statute of limitations. And for example, in 2018, a collection of documents, Khatyn Killers, the 118th Battalion of the Security Policy of Ukraine in Belarus, was published, which emphasized that it was the Ukrainians who burned the Belarusian village. During the public speeches covered by the media, it is also said that the Ukrainians will have to admit their complicity. This is only one example of such cooperation. But, for example, with participation of this fund, were created database of burned Belarusian village, and now this is a base for this new law on genocide of Belarusian people. And this is only two examples. Other points, it's difficult to compare because I think sometimes Belarus was the first. And we should study more this question, but sometimes I think, yes, we were the first in such very strange story. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina. I don't see other questions from the audience, so I would like to ask Christoph.
Yes, I would like to come back to this, what you mentioned before about this, if it is too much.
Oh yes, please.
And I would say I would keep it in the words as Robert Musil said. There's nothing in the world as invisible as a monument, because monuments are there and we just pass by, and they are staying there. But only if we give them a meaning, then they will have then we will realize them. And this is what we should do. This is our the task of us intellectuals, of journalists, of academics, of everybody, to give a kind of value and to give a meaning to monuments, and then we cannot have enough.
Yeah, that's a very powerful point, and it reminds me of seeing the monument to the Red Army soldiers in Warsaw, in Ochota. It's, pretty much just deserted. I think in the sense that in the post-Soviet time, that particular site has lost much of its meaning. It doesn't resonate with the people. I think that's what you're trying to get at. Yeah, maybe we can use the next few minutes to give each of the speakers a moment to share their final thoughts. In the discussion, in your presentation, we covered a lot of ground about sites of memory that can unite. At least that's what the creators for this national remembrance. But also sites can cause divisions internally or with neighbors. And in that regard, I'm also curious, Christoph, a number of years ago, the expellees wanted to have their own museum. That's the German, those who were expelled from the Eastern territories. And that, I understand, created quite a bit of a international controversy, especially with Poland and with Czech Republic. So in that sense, memory can also, or memorials, or proposed memorials even, can be divisive. And so I just want to give each of the speakers a few minutes to share your thoughts on the overall theme of memorial landscape, or anything you would like to add. Maybe Christoph, you can start with maybe just answering also this question specifically about.
Yes, actually this museum, what you mentioned, for the expulsion of the Germans from Poland, this exists. It is in the center of Berlin, and but it exists as a center of expulsion and reconciliation. So just to say it briefly, the controversy was, is it appropriate to speak about the expulsion without speaking about the guilt before?
Mm-hmm.
And they just now made it like that. They are speaking about briefly about what the Germans did in Poland and in Eastern Central Europe at all. They also put on they have 2 floors. The second floor is dedicated to the expulsion of the Germans from Poland, from Czech Republic, and from the eastern parts. And the first floor is dedicated to expulsions worldwide. So it means that they just want to put it into a narrative that expulsions happen everywhere, political expulsions, and that it is that the German case is not unique, but for the Germans it is in a way unique because they like to, or they want to remember it in a way. What I'm just also like to speak about is transnationalism and so on. Is like there's an initiative now, a Polish memorial in Berlin, in central Berlin. It is about the victims of Poland, and I'm just a bit aware about this because when we start with Poland, where it will end. The Polish would maybe say like it doesn't matter where it should end because you made crimes on us, and that's why we are kind of legitimized to have such a memorial. And the problem is that I think that it is more a political memorial, and I'm not sure if memorials should be erecting out of political initiatives or kind of reconciliation, because Germany doesn't like to pay any money for Poland. Poland now accuses Germany and wanted to have a lot of money, and now Germany maybe is just saying, okay, then we will build a memorial, and after this everything will be fine. I'm just not. I don't believe in this, and but there I'm just interested what Estera would say about this, and so that's why I'm just for an understanding of my final remark is about memorials and the crash of memorials. I'm pretty much not a fan of destroying memorials because memorials are a part of the history, and if you like it or not, it is your history. And the way how to deal with this would be, for me, a contextualization, to put it to contextualize it in time and now, and to give it a meaning in nowadays. And that's what I said earlier. So that's why my plaidoyer is kind of leave the memorials, but play with it, or just give them a meaning, or do something with them, but don't destroy them, because they are part of your history and of maybe a shared history, like the Soviet memorials in Germany.
Thank you, Christoph. We will go to Estera, if you would like to either answer Christoph's question or just to share your reflection in general.
Yeah, so to start with answer, very difficult topic. I mean, Polish-German relations, especially now. And I'm not optimistic. I don't see a solution for right now. I mean, as Christoph said, memorial won't be a solution. I mean, it won't be over this discussion. And I would be very happy if politics would take a step back from this discussion, and they left it to historians or lawyers who are specialists on international law and such cases like reparations after wars. But I know it's like utopia, so it's rather more impossible. And final conclusion. So I hope after February 24, it will be obvious that civil experience is very important part of history. And I hope it will also be obvious that there are different types of resistance, that it's not only fighting with a gun, but it's also taking care about culture. There's something like a civil resistance. And yeah, so I hope that there will be a discussion about how to discuss on war after war in Ukraine has started.
Thank you for that great suggestion. I hope we can follow up with these suggestions and initiatives. Irina, would you like to share your final thoughts with us?
I think that maybe the main thing that I should emphasize at the end of our conversation, on the example of Russia and Belarus, we can see what does it mean if the memory policy have founded not on the victims but on the hero, and
Not
why
all-
we should work, yeah, and why we should work under all of these topics.
All right. As you can see, we have more questions than answers, and then new suggestions for initiatives. That's always a good sign. But our time is up, so let me just wrap up our discussion. I want to, first of all, if you have seen it, you have not seen it, there are websites and media resources and future events organized by the EU-Russia Civil Society Forum. And I want to thank each of the speakers for your excellent presentation. And I also want to thank the organizers, especially Christina and Marcus and Anna and Noah, who worked behind the scene. And I also want to thank all of you who stayed with us from different parts of the world for this great discussion and your questions. I hope to see all of you again. And our discussion panel is concluded. Thank you and good evening.
And thank you very much, Professor Yang, for moderation.